welcome back after lunch and after Tom's very inspiring session. Thank you, panel, for agreeing to come and give us your thoughts. And the topic that we're going to cover is implementing BCM in the Middle East region, the way forward. I'd like to invite Mohamed to start. Yes. Tell us, if you will, what do you think the current situation is of business continuity in the Gulf region, and what do you see as the major challenge to move that forward?
Thank you. First, I want to blame my friend Diraj for two things, because he delayed our panel discussion, and he changed also the topic. Earlier he said implementing BCM in Arabic, then he changed to Middle East, so it's okay. I think literally BCM is BCM in everywhere. Whether you implement it in Arabic or English, in Middle East or UK or USA, it's same, but the difference in the way of implementation. The way of implementation based on organization culture, also the size of organization too. So the discrepancies in BCM in Middle East and other countries in way of implementation. Of course, it's a new concept in Middle East. And for my country, we have only 3 organizations that using BCM in their management. So we are in the beginning right now.
And to change from 3 to 103 companies doing BCM, but what's the next step for them? What do you think will be the catalyst that helps them take that next step?
I think they have to go directly to the BCM, especially in Saudi Arabia, for example. Last 2 years, there was a flood happened in Jeddah. So the importance of BCM become clear in all our organization. So we have to straightforward to implement this specification in everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Rizvi next, if I may. Based on your experience, do you think there are cultural issues that get in the way or make it more difficult to implement BCM? I guess I'm looking really at the fact that many companies in the region are perhaps more conservative, more traditional than countries in the USA or the UK would be. Is that a good thing for business continuity, or is that just a different aspect that we have to work with?
In terms of business continuity implementation in this region, the methodology is going to be the same, but the battlefield is different. The key thing over here, in my experience, I've been with many clients, the most important thing is the awareness. The education is the core of the effectiveness of implementing a BCM. So first, make sure the audience understands the BCM and they have the right knowledge, and then the implementation. You can talk about the implementation of business continuity management for a company. Now, does the culture play a role in BCM implementation? Of course, because it's not the same way that you implement in Europe as compared to Middle East and the various other parts of the world. So the approaches are key here. When you reach out to a private sector versus a government sector, the way you approach to your client is a bit different. You got to be friendly with people. I mean, the personal touch makes the difference. So you got to be close to the client, build a good relationship with the client, and then you talk about implemented effectiveness and etc. So yes, the culture makes a difference, and the next message is the education. So if you have these 2 things in place, I'm sure you can be a successful implementer.
Can I turn to Omar then and ask about education? What do you think about the benefits of certification and of standards in this region? Is that something to be promoted to help the growth of BCM? And how do you see that as progressing over the next few years?
Thanks. I mean, definitely, yeah. What I've seen over the last 5 or 6 years here in the region is that it's, and the proper way of saying it, this will be a certification-oriented, in the sense that, you know, people always look forward to getting better certification and achieving certification. I'm assuming you're talking about personal certifications or as in the standardizing certifications? Okay. So let's talk about the personal, then we're going to move to the getting certified against a specific standard. Okay. The commenting on what Ruth said is that there is definitely a lack of awareness and lack of education when it comes to the area of business continuity within the region. Earlier I was chatting with Steve, and we talked about that the way I'm seeing it is that we are at the crawling stage. We're not yet even walking, so we're just crawling. There is no proper understanding of business continuity. Most of the companies in the region, with exception to few, I mean, their understanding of business continuity is what I like to call IT continuity. So, you know, you start talking to a specific, you know, entity, and then, you know, talking about business continuity. But then as you start getting deeper and deeper with the discussion, you notice that it's only IT they're looking at it. They're not looking into the whole business. And that's basically not what business continuity is. So we need to kind of raise an awareness about what business continuity is all about. Having the skill set, or people who have the proper skill set within the organization. And that's where training and education comes in place. Moving to the point about the standardization, there is a race happening, or have been happening, in terms of getting certified. You know, for example, you know, Abdulaziz got for his company an ISO 27001, or, you know, I want to do the same thing, right? Now, my personal recommendations usually here is that, does it add a value to the company? I've done a lot of 27001 consultations within the region, and usually my advice to the clients is that implement it, do it. Now, later down the road, if you see a value to the business of getting certified, in other words, will it open opportunities, will it be a competitive value to you, then you can go for it. Which will be not that much of a difficult task, because if you're doing it, it's part of the culture, it's part of my day-to-day operations. Getting the certificate is going to be just a matter of the paperwork, getting the auditor and doing the audits, and that's all about it. I mean, I already have the references, I have the records, so everything is there. With the introduction of 22301, I think there is, because of the fact that today you have better awareness when it comes to business continuity than 5 or 6 years ago when we had the BS 25999. I believe 22301 is gaining popularity within the market. And I think within the next 2 years, we're going to see lots of companies and organizations are going or working towards getting the certificate. But again, the question keeps asking itself is that, are they doing it because they really want to increase or improve their business continuity posture within the organization, or just for the sake of having a nice, cool certificate that we can say, you know, announce it and put it in our advertisement?
Thanks. And I think you're supporting what Tom said in the previous presentation, that in a sense, a certification should be a byproduct of a good program, that the benefit of the program should be the resilience and the recoverability itself. And that if you can get a certification on the side, then that's a good thing. But it shouldn't be the reason for doing business continuity, which I think is a very valid point. I'd like to come back to something that Rizvi said, and Mike, I'll ask you to field this one if I may. You talked about events. And I guess the Middle East, perhaps until recently with the Arab Spring of last year, etc., that the region has been quite safe in many ways. The UK in particular has suffered from internal terrorism for 20, 30, 40 years. People have had a long history of needing to react to events. And that, I think, has given companies in the UK some impetus to do some work in this field. Do you think that is a barrier in the Middle East, or again, is it just not a consideration anymore that people have learned from others and have moved on?
Do I think the relative peace in the Middle East is a barrier to business continuity? The lady at the back made a really, I didn't get your name, forgive me, we haven't met, but she made a very valid point about experience, and it's only really when one experiences a difficulty that you can take it seriously, or you can think about it, and you can possibly then learn to do something about it. Now, everyone today has made very good points about the need for education, and education can only go so far. Tom made some excellent points about trying to work with senior management to help them understand the impacts if they haven't experienced it. But having spent 6 months in Bahrain recently, working there as head of security for a major oil and gas, as well as doing business continuity and working with some of the companies in Soha, in Oman, that experienced the slightly more aggressive side, if you will, of the Arab Spring issues in Oman, there are certainly a greater focus from those countries and companies that have had a first-hand experience. Now, my wife is delighted that I'm in the Middle East because she said it's the safest place that I've been for about 30 years. But from a business continuity perspective, that can be an issue because it can all seem a little bit academic sometimes. And I particularly liked what Tom had to say, that even a very large company like PwC are being dynamic in the way that they're looking at business continuity, and they're not just looking at planning for planning's sake. I think, you know, it's that approach, and taking that approach as our individual businesses will help us increase resilience. You know, that, and again the education, because there's in Bahrain, in Oman, here in the Emirates, there are, you know, very aggressive and understandably and appropriately Omanization projects and Emiratization projects and Saudiization and Bahrainization to make sure that the indigenous people of those countries are properly employed and being brought on. The difficulty is, for generations, they've known nothing but peace and relative stability. In Oman, the two cyclones, Guno and Fet, in the past few years, they've really concentrated the mind. You know, my colleague here for Jeddah, I mean, goodness me, Jeddah has been devastated over the past few years with some unbelievable flooding even. So, you know, you have no problem convincing the people of Jeddah that you need to have resilience and business continuity planning in place. And, you know, these are key aspects, I think.
Actually, you're right. We didn't have problem since 30 years ago. But this is something and nowadays we are facing many problems. It's maybe in the near future, maybe we don't know about the political situation. So we have to consider about this, and we have to put more effort in demonstration and demonstration the importance of BCM and for individual, for governments, for everybody here.
So perhaps that's one of the challenges for the region is in developing a crisis management capability for an area that has had relatively few crises, perhaps. Rizvi, what do you feel about that?
Yes, the crisis management is another important pillar within the business continuity management. In my opinion, I would prefer to have the crisis management capability well before the business continuity arrangements are made. Now, how do we do that is there various ways wherein you can do that, whether you take the bottom-up approach or the top-down approach. In my opinion, what works well is something which I have experienced, and I've been doing this even presently, is the taking the top-down approach. So you set up your crisis leadership team, educate them, and develop their competency in managing a crisis. Do as much as you can simulation programs, you know. So this could really bring up the capability within your crisis leadership team in terms of handling and managing a crisis. And then you make sure the down-level teams like emergency response teams are capable enough to handle the situation. So I think, yes, it is important in an organization to have a better crisis management capability from a top-down approach.
What about, Omar, I'll turn back to you, the relationship between individual firms and the governments in the countries they are? How well do you think that's evolving so that a company's own response can integrate with the government's response to whether it's a business crisis or a wider scale, nationwide crisis?
Well, I mean, today was the first time I heard about the UAE program. It's the first time I heard about it, and I think it's a quite impressive initiative. I have to congratulate all the guys who are working on it and the gentlemen on it. But and I think that this could be used or can be used as a good example or a model for the other countries in the region to try to do this integration. What's happening is that even if we assume that there is a crisis management happening or being prepared within the private organizations and the government, but there is no any sort of integration. So it's like silos again, and we come to it. There is no like a centralized entities that basically, or centralized unit that can manage all of these together and put them together, get all of these efforts together. So in case of a countrywide or a nationwide crisis, that people can, operate in a collaborated way and a coordinated way. But I believe this can, we can see this as the maturity start happening in terms of crisis management, understanding that crisis can happen to the region. It's not like, it's something like far away from us, it will never come to us. No, it can happen, it is happening. Over the last few years or a couple of years back, we've seen some major crises happening within the region. It shows, and I think it gave a very good and excellent, I hate to say it, but it's an excellent way of doing an awareness to the people that, this kind of things can happen. And are we ready? Can we handle it? September 11 was a catastrophic, was a very devastated incident, but it also taught a lot of companies back in the US about crisis management, response, incident response, etc. And I think this is happening now. I think the UAE model will be used or will be maybe adopted similarly, in similar manners, by maybe the other countries in the region, and start looking into doing the same thing. Now, most of the, for example, in the CERTs, for example, the Computer Emergency Response Teams, most of the countries in the Gulf or in the region, they have their own national CERTs. I think the next step will be is to adopt the same thing in terms of the crisis management and having such kind of government, or doesn't have to be government, but usually it's a government-initiated approach.
Yeah, please.
I think your question was about the individual and governments, because we are all talking about the organization, government, and stuff like this, and we didn't talk about the individuals. We have to increase the awareness of crisis management for individual also. So then we start with the organization and companies and government. I'm talking about myself. I don't have fire extinguisher in my home. So things like this, we have to improve it. We have to increase the awareness about the BCM for individual, along with also for the government and organization.
Perhaps I can ask a question to the audience, and excuse me, I just have to shield my eyes from the light. Could you put your hands up if your organization has tested your business continuity plans? Okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hand up if that test has included the emergency services. Okay. Has it included the local government authority? Yeah? Oh, a couple still staying up. Has it included national government representatives? Your regulators? Very good. Oh, 1, 2, I think I can see. And that's actually more than I normally get when I ask that question. After the emergency services, most hands go down when it comes to local or regional or national governments. And I think it's a challenge in most countries, and here as well by the sound of it, to take a business continuity program to that next level, to make sure that your response is integrated with the response of others. I used to have a slide which showed how many different government agencies or semi-government agencies were involved, and Mike's nodding, you've probably seen this one. There's concentric rings, and it's something like 100, in the UK, this is something like 120 different government agencies have some right to be involved in a major incident at your facility, either because it's fire or because it's a criminal activity and the police are involved. If there's deaths, the coroner will be involved, the local authority because they may need to close roads and dig things up to try and recover services to your building, etc. But the list was really surprisingly long, and when I was looking at it for my firm in the UK, we'd actually included about 7 of the 120, and we thought we ran a pretty good program. And it gave me quite a shock to actually realise how many other people I still had to talk to. Let me come back to something that was touched on earlier, and Mike, you used the words risk and resilience. Several people today have touched on the differences, the overlaps between risk, business continuity, resilience. Tell us what that looks like in your words. What are the differences and the overlaps in terms like that?
So a few years ago, I probably would have had my membership of the BCI scrapped and taken from me if I said what I'm about to say. But business continuity is about managing risk. It's a form of managing risk. And I think a lot of times people get involved, and Tom hinted at this in his presentation, they get involved in following the steps of the cycle and going through those steps rather slavishly. Let's do BIAs, let's do determining the strategy, let's develop and implement a response, let's exercise, maintain and review. And these things are all good and laudable if, as Tom said, they're adding value to the organization. And what I think we need to think about is that business continuity alone isn't the panacea to an organization's problems. And it won't be. I think one of my colleagues here on this table this morning asked about, where should business continuity sit within an organization? Again, yes, the person answering the question at the time gave the right answer, which is it depends. But it was Steve, in fact. Yeah, it depends. But I think for all of us as risk professionals, if you will, or business continuity professionals, we're about protecting our organizations, protecting them from the reasonable and valid threats that we understand might affect our organization. So the threats to eBay are not the same as the threats to the Rural Areas Electricity Company or the Public Authority for Social Insurance, or Saudi Post. There are many similar threats and many similar risks, but each one of us has a responsibility to understand the risks to our organizations, whichever organization we're working with at the time, and to manage those. So for me, the overlap is about understanding. And sometimes I think as business continuity professionals, we can be a little bit guilty of trying to be a bit protective and a bit precious of what we are trying to do. And I think we should, as an organization, look at, just as Margaret said today, an enterprise-wide risk management.
Okay, Mohamed's nodding here.
Yeah, because he mentioned about the Saudi Post, and you said there is a little threats. The future of Saudi Arabia, we aim to be the essential arm of e-governments. So there is no e-governments without post. Also, there is no e-commerce without post also. So we do have a lot of risk. Yeah.
I bet you do.
Also, I'm sorry. Just I want to give you a brief summary about my organization. I'm from Saudi Post. We have around 13,000 employees. We have 30 regions. We are in the middle of BCM project. We start with gap assessment, and we more emphasize on the training and awareness. We train more than 1,000 people in the culture of BCM, Also, we assign a coordinator for each department to at least to speak same language, to give us what we want from them if in case of if you want to complete BIA and RA stuff and other documents. That's why we conduct 12 workshops just for training for culture. Also, we aim the GM for each department and give them training, special training for them. Also, we design a training course for each employees, and the course will be mandatory for every employees. Just we want to make sure about that the culture of BCM widespread over the organization.
Thanks. And Rizvi, let's just go back to the risk resilience overlap. How do you see that in the companies that you visited? Is it well defined where those two things are, or is it a bit of a mix everywhere?
Is it the BCM and the risk management?
Yeah, risk, BCM, resilience. Is it clear what the differences are for most organisations, or are people still trying to work through that themselves?
What BCM is trying to do is trying to address the risk. At the end of the day, you're contributing to the organization risk management. Now, what as part of the business continuity management, what we try to do is scientifically you try and analyze the risk and the impacts. And then you try to quantify to the management, yes, this is a risk and this is the impact. So you basically quantify that. But when you look at from the risk management point of view, the organization risk management point of view, they don't normally quantify them. Yes, they say that, yes, this is a risk and this is the threat to the organization. But what we do is, as part of the business continuity management, we exactly quantify them. So you tell them, this is your main revenue stream, and this is the impact, and this much you will lose by looking at the average income. So, and that is easy, and that is a tool for the top management to decide on the implementation strategy. Or yes, this is a solution which is available, and this is the cost for that, and it is worth implementing that. So it's easy for them to take even a good decision, by quantifying them. So this has been done by the BCM team, right? So, and then in terms of resilience, yes, what you try to do is you're not going to be 100% perfect by implementing certain solutions, but all what you're trying to do is some sort of a resilience. So probably you might not work on the same level of a normal BAE situation. So we talk about a good resilience in the sense you will basically, you try to live during a disaster. So you will not die, but you will try to stand at least with the help of one leg. So this is the objective as well in terms of BCM, the professionals. So you're not trying to address 100%, but you try to live at least 30 or 40% or 50%. So with that, you make sure the business is continuing, so it's not dying. I hope I clarified sufficiently.
Thank you. What I'd like to do, just to wrap up and then invite any questions from the audience, is starting at this end. So Mike, you get a bit of time to think about this. In one sentence, or a couple of short sentences, what's the biggest challenge that practitioners in this region face in developing their business continuity capability?
Convincing senior management.
Convincing senior management. And is that because the senior management don't get it, or just haven't had the chance to be exposed?
Yeah, they don't see it. I mean, they see it as, I don't need it. We've been operating for the last 5 years or 10 years, nothing happened to us, So why do we need it now? That's usually the key issue for most of the organization. And I think maybe even, come to think of it, that might be one of the reasons why it's always IT who are doing it, because of their critical operations. That's why they can do it, and it's a smaller scale, so it's under their control. They can take it to the upper level.
Okay, and I think later in the agenda, I think Steve is moderating a session on persuading the C-suite. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Mohamed, for you, what's the biggest challenge for practitioners to overcome?
Persuading the top management. Persuading the top management and awareness and education.
I too agree with Mohamed. Education is the key, even for the top management.
I wish I had more time to think of something. No, I think it's awareness, but I'd say that it's awareness coupled with an arrogance born out of the amount of money, because there's so much money in so many of the organizations here, and so many organizations are significantly government-owned in Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, that many companies that I speak to say the government would not allow us to fail. So therefore, why should we plan, why should we plan to deal with a crisis? We'll let the crisis come, inshallah, we'll be fine, and we'll come through that. I will.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the floor for any of the panel on what we've just discussed? I have to shade my eyes again. Steve.
Thank you. Just a quick response from each of the panelists, please. Whereabouts in the world do you see the best examples of achieving business continuity and organisational resilience, and why do you think that is? I'll start with Mike, because he's got less time to think about that one.
Okay, well, I'll take that one. Having been, as Tom liked to say, global head, so having been a global head of a bank, business continuity function, and certainly national head, I think the where I would have to put into a sector, and I'd say banking and finance, regardless of where you find them, are usually much more mature. And that's because, as Mr. Janabia said during his speech, that the impact for them over such a short period of time can be quite enormous, whereas for a number of other sectors, the impact can grow and can be a little slower. But where there's a very high dependency on IT, or a very high dependency on, or a very high turnover of money in a short period of time, then those businesses are very focused on their resilience. And so rather than saying it's New York or London or Frankfurt or Zurich or Shanghai or any of the other sort of countries that are places that I've worked in, I'd say that it's a sector thing. I'd say that it's the finance sector is where I see the best or the most mature business continuity and resilience.
I think he has covered most of the data which I'm supposed to give. I rightly agree with him because you will not be able to tell you by country whether US is mature than Emirates. So it's by the sector. So over here, again, I re-emphasize on the financial sectors, the financial and the banking, and then it goes down to the aviations and the oil sector, oil and gas sector. So it's basically, you can definitely tell you that who are the audience that are serious about business continuity is by the sector, not as a country.
Actually, I agree with my colleagues. I don't want to repeat more words, just agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't look at it country-wise. It's sector-wise because, like, for example, whether you take US or Europe, you're going to find some companies are quite mature when it comes to business continuity, while others are not. And it's the same across. Financial sectors, yes, money. Oil and gas is another area because, I mean, again, if one of their operations or refinery stops, that's money being wasted. So that would be another area or another sector.
And I'd agree, Steve, I know you're directing this at the panel rather than the moderator, but I think in those sectors it's because you can quantify the loss so quickly, so readily. if I don't do this for 3 hours, I lose X dollars. And I think that helps give a message that's very easy to sell to the board. It's very difficult to do that in some industries. Having said that, one of the best examples I ever saw was a factory in Scotland that made syringes for medical injections. And the company involved had 2 production lines, one in Scotland and one in Malaysia. And their business continuity was an example of what Tom would refer to as new normal. That if in fact they lost either production line, they would instantly switch production to the remaining production line, but they would not rebuild the first factory. The factory that had had an incident would cease to exist. They would actually redesign their entire production process. If they had to spend the money to re-establish the facility anyway, they would take the chance to re-engineer entirely how they performed the process. They weren't going to shut one of the factories to do that. That didn't make commercial sense. And in a sense, I kind of got the feel that the chief operations officer was almost hoping for this terrible fire so that he could rebuild his organisation from the bottom up, because it's what he desperately wanted to do, but he didn't have an imperative to do it. And that, I think, is Tom's new normal. There was no intention to recover. It was to change, to adapt, to evolve. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel for their contributions. Omar, Mohamed, Rizvi, Mike, thank you very much. And I'll hand back to Diraj for the next session. Thank you very much.
Just wanted to throw it open in case there are any questions for the panel. We have time for a few questions in case you've got these side gentlemen.
I could think of one, and that's a high reliance on expat workforce. Thanks. See a great deal of knowledge transfer happening from expat workforce through to either Emirati, Bahraini, Qatari, Saudi, or Omani, workforces. So I would say, for me, Naseem, I think that's one of the biggest challenges here.
Which is specific to this region, particularly for UAE, is one of the major threats could be communication line failures. Like we got Etisalat and Do here, probably they might share the same backbone. So what if the entire backbone collapses? This is going to be a major challenge.
I think same thing. In Saudi Arabia also, I think the big obstacle or challenge is awareness and the importance of BCM.
Okay. All right. I'm going to add to both gentlemen over there. Definitely there is a dependency on the expats and foreign consultants. The one thing which is I have to agree on it is that for Oman specifically, I have seen that. I've done a couple of projects there, and yes, there is always the tendency of to train the nationals or the Omanis in terms of being able to do this at a certain point by themselves and not to depend on outsiders or consultants to come and do it. Telecommunication, 2008, I believe so. That's when somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea, a fisherman couldn't distinguish between a fish and a cable, and he pulled the cable thinking it was a fish, and caused that the whole region went down in terms of internet communication. I think that's also a very good example of unpredicted disasters can happen and can have a threat on the region because of the fact that most of the business today is based on communication, internet, connectivity, etc.
Thank you. And any further questions for the panel? One at the front here. Can I pass you
that? Yes. Okay. I have two questions actually. I think the main things about awareness program that the people are not understanding this project, business continuity is for their safety. It's not just for the money or for the building to be cared about. It's about their safety. So I think we need to be aware in our awareness program that this plan is for their safety, to make it more healthy for them. And the second question is is, do we need to put a criteria for implementing the plan? Yes, like if there is a power failure, can we inform employee to leave or not? Or we need to call all the crisis committees for that decision? I think we need to put a criteria for that to implement anything. We cannot put any cases and we call the people, come to meeting, we need to take some decision. I think we need a criteria for that. Am I right or not? I don't know. It depends on your idea, I think.
Yes, I think regarding the second point, I understand what you're saying. Usually what you're talking about is more of the escalation procedures, in the sense that, you know, when can we announce that an event to become an incident and an incident to be a crisis, right? And usually, yes, you're right, as part of any development of any such kind of a projects, we have to put certain criteria in terms of, you know, if the impact reaches a certain level, and that means it's an incident or it's a crisis, disaster, etc., etc.
Any other comments on that? Was that okay? Did that? Okay. And any further questions for the panel? One right at the back over there. We've got to get a microphone there somewhere.
I'm here now. Since morning, hello gentlemen. Since morning we've been talking about awareness. I mean, who is responsible for these to give the awareness, especially in the government organizations? In our organization, we don't have any BCM consultants or the experts who can aware our management and senior management that this is very important for us. We have to go. Is there any governing body over here within the government of Abu Dhabi or UAE, within the UAE? I mean, who will give the awareness to the government departments? I don't know about the private sector, but especially in the government, like whether there is a need of any governing body. I mean, who will give the awareness, the education to the different the organizations that this BCM is a need for every organization.
Okay, so you're asking who should lead the various awareness and training programs?
Exactly. I mean, we've been talking since morning, awareness. Yeah. So who will initiate this one? From where?
And I'll just come to my, and I guess within that question, we're saying there's perhaps some government level things, there's some corporate things, there's maybe some individual things. I'm paraphrasing a bit.
I think without trying to in any way play it down, I think, as Gandhi said, we must become the change that we want to see. And so I think where we have people like, my colleague from Saudi Post doing such a great job within that hopefully the other government departments will see that. The table over here are some of my friends from Oman, from one of the government agencies there. They've done a full business continuity implementation in their organization. Now, inshallah, other government organizations will look at them and they'll say, good, we want to do this. And so it will be sort of bottom up, if you will, but already starting at quite a high level. Again, this group have brought their head of risk, a very senior person from within the organization. That person has the opportunity to speak to other people at his level within other government organizations to say, you should think about this. There's always going to be consultants like me going to the regulators and other government bodies, in a sense, trying to sell, because that's what we do. But a better way is through the demonstration of organizations that have successfully implemented business continuity, saying to their colleagues, look what we've done, look at the benefits this program is giving to us. And then, inshallah, the whole government will step up, as they have very wisely done here in the UAE, and created NCEMA, an organization to deal with that. And then if they have wise governance like Mr. Janabaya, then inshallah everything will work out. But a lot of inshallahs there. So.
Thank you.
And also, if you look at the financial sectors, even the central bank regulation is there. You've got to have a business continuity capability within the financial sector. So it's a regulatory requirement. And again, in formation of NCEMA, which will also, in the future, will put different sectors, whether it is a private sector or the government sector, to sort of regularize their business continuity capabilities. They might not sort of enforce immediately, but in the coming years, they might even enforce them. So then you see a need, you see? So you have to keep creating the awareness within the organization and then look for the implementation as well.
I'm just going to...
No, I'm going to shout.
My answer would be for you in terms of for awareness, who should take that initiative. I would say you, each person. I mean, you can take that initiative. I mean, I don't have to wait for someone or an entity. Yes, I agree with you. There should be some sort of a governance body who is regulating the awareness within the organization. But it might be too of a small company where you don't have that capability. Just like, you know, whenever I see something in the news or I read an article about, you know, some bad behavior or something that can cause a disease or whatever, and I come and talk to my colleagues about it, it's the same thing here. That's an awareness. I mean, I've always told people, awareness doesn't have to be putting people in a room and, you know, lecturing them. That doesn't have, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be as simple as sitting with a colleague or a bunch of colleagues at the office and just, you know, talking about some hints and tips of this kind of things. Yes, you're right, it needs to be regulated. If the organization is not, I'm not going to say mature enough, but large enough, you might have a training and awareness division or department or whatever, and they will be the ones initiating that. They will coordinate with the BCM continuity team, etc. At the government level, I think once you have entities like the SEMA that they were talking about it earlier today in UAE, I think it's such kind of organization. I know, for example, back in Saudi Arabia, a few years ago, SAMA, which is the Saudi Agency Monitor Authority, I forgot the name of it, but basically it's like the central bank over there, and they were initiating this large awareness campaign for ATMs, you know, and across all of the banks. They also did a couple of years ago initiatives about educating call center agents with all of the banks. So they were doing an awareness for all of the people, basically, the customers, in terms of ATM security and ATM's awareness, etc. And then they did the same thing for the call agents. So these kind of organizations usually takes that lead once they are formalized. But until then, you do it. I'll support you.
What about the Ministry of Culture take part in this work?
I mean, it can be. I mean, definitely yes. I mean, I think, but again, if they take that initiative, you know, it will be, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Diraj, are we okay to finish that like that, or where's he gone? Okay, so I can't see any more hands. So again, I'd like to thank the panel very much for their contributions. Thank you for your questions, and we'll hand back to Diraj.